Today, we are diving into an incredible story from the Book of Numbers. It's about a 40-year journey that stalled right at the finish line. We're going to look at one crucial choice that defined a whole generation, and honestly, what it says about the big choices we face in our own lives.
All right, I want you to just imagine this for a second. You've spent 4 decades, 40 years, in the middle of a brutal, unforgiving desert. You've faced so much hardship, so much uncertainty, all for one single goal. And then you're there. You're finally there. You can literally see the prize, the promise, everything you've ever worked for. It's right there, just on the other side of one last hurdle. You can almost touch it.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? This was the exact spot the Israelites were in. Every single sign pointed forward, but instead, an entire generation just stopped. So let's really get into this moment, this showdown between a divine promise and very, very human fear.
Okay, so let's start with the path the majority took. It's a path that came from something the source material calls impossible thinking. And let me tell you, that kind of mindset, it can stop any of us in our tracks, no matter how close we are to our goal.
So here's what happens. Moses sends 12 spies into the Promised Land, and they come back with 2 completely different stories. It's a total fork in the road. 10 of them say, no way, it's a dead end. There are giants there. Their cities are like fortresses. We literally felt like grasshoppers. But 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, saw the exact same things and came back saying, this is God's land for us, and we can absolutely take it.
So now the people have a choice, right? Who are you going to listen to? The 10 guys talking about giants or the 2 guys talking about God's promise? Well, they sided with the 10. They chose fear. They started complaining, they turned on their leaders, and they basically just accepted defeat before even trying.
And the fallout from this choice? Wow, it wasn't just a delay. It was a 40-year sentence to wander and die in the wilderness. The data is just staggering. If you look at the census for the tribe of Simeon, for example, their population dropped by over 62%. The cost of fear was absolutely catastrophic. But what about that other path, the one less traveled? This is the path of those 2 spies, the path of faith. They just refused to get swept away in that powerful current of negativity and fear. Okay, now fast forward 40 years. That whole fearful generation is gone. Caleb is now an old man, and he walks up to the new leader, Joshua. And you know what? His faith is just as fired up as it was 4 decades earlier. He doesn't ask for some easy retirement spot. Nope, he points to Hebron, the very place where the giants were, and he says, give me this mountain. God is with me. I will drive them out. That conviction never, ever left him.
The sources call this an upstream attitude, and I just love that phrase. It's this idea of deciding to swim against the current. You know, when everyone around you is just drifting with negativity and saying it's impossible, this attitude keeps your eyes on the promise, not on the size of the problems.
And that's really what it all boiled down to. This was the one thing you couldn't get in without. It wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. The one non-negotiable ticket into the Promised Land was this kind of upstream, unwavering faith.
But, being afraid of giants isn't the only way we get off track. There's another, much sneakier detour, the temptation of settling for good enough, and it's just as dangerous.
So as the next generation gets ready to finally cross the river, 2 of the tribes, Reuben and Gad, they look around at the land they're in. And hey, it's pretty nice, it's fertile, it's comfortable. And they basically go to Moses and say, you know what? This is good enough for us. We'll just stop here. They chose what the sources called temporary ease over the full incredible promise that was waiting for them just a little bit further ahead.
So what happened? Well, in the short term, yeah, they got their comfy land. But centuries down the road, when invaders came to attack Israel, who do you think were the very first tribes to get wiped out and dragged into exile? Yep, the ones who settled on that vulnerable edge of the map. Their choice for today's comfort had deadly consequences for their future.
All right, let's look at one last failure. And this one is fascinating because it doesn't come from fear or from settling. It comes from experience. This is a huge lesson about how even the best leaders can trip up when they stop listening for fresh instructions. So the people are complaining again. No surprise there. They're thirsty. God gives Moses a very clear, very simple command. Speak to the rock. That's it. Just talk to it. But Moses is angry, he's frustrated, and he's thinking, I've done this before. The last time this happened, he hit the rock. So instead of speaking, he defaults to his old method. He takes his staff and strikes the rock twice. It seems like such a tiny detail, right? Speak, strike, what's the big deal? But it was a huge deal.
By striking the rock, Moses made it about him, about his action and his frustration, instead of just simply obeying and letting God get the glory. And for that one act of disobedience, even Moses, the guy who led them for 40 years, was not allowed to enter the Promised Land.
So, what does all this mean for us? I mean, these are ancient stories, but these paths, these dead ends and detours, they are so relevant to the choices we're all making today, standing at the edge of our own promised lands.
When you boil it all down, these stories give us 4 powerful lessons. First, we have to reject that impossible thinking that's just fueled by fear. Second, we need to actively build that upstream attitude that's based on conviction. Third, we got to avoid the trap of good enough, that short-sightedness that makes us settle for less than the best. And finally, just like Moses' story shows us, we need to listen for today's instructions, not just rely on what worked yesterday.
And that leaves us with one final thought, one question for you to take with you. We all have giants in our lives, right? Obstacles that just seem way too big. So the question is, what promise is waiting for you on the other side of your fear? Identifying that giant is the first step. Choosing that upstream path? Well, that's where the real adventure begins.